What is going on, guys? My name is Aaron, and this is the Game Day Hour. Welcome back to another episode, and this is a very special one. It's episode 37, and instead of doing Fantasy Hour and Game Day picks, we are committing this entire episode to college football and all the bowl games and the college football playoffs. This has been a very interesting year for college football for a few reasons, and actually just really two specifically. One, it was conference realignments. You had a lot of conferences switching up. The Pac-12 got very empty. These other four Power 4 conferences got very, very strong. And then here's another thing. You had the new playoff format in which it went from 4 teams to 12 teams. So this is going to be very interesting to look over. We actually have a legitimate playoffs. And first, we're going to take a look at the bowl games, looking over each and every single bowl game for the FBS. And we're going to be taking a look at who wins each of these bowl games, but they won't take super long. We're going to put a little more in-depth conversation with the college football playoffs. So I hope you guys are ready, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. But I want to personally thank all of y'all for helping me reach 100 subscribers. It is an honor, and I just look to get better and better, and hopefully we can have more fun throughout the entire year and into season 3. So I thank you guys for helping me reach this milestone. More to come. Thank you guys so much again. Let's get started on today's episode. As a quick note, NFL predictions and, well, there's no more fantasy stuff, but NFL predictions will be on X at TGD Hour. So if you guys want to go see what I say for my picks, just so you can fact check me, go to Twitter. Anyways, let's get started with the first bowl game. The first bowl game is the IS4S Salute to Veterans Bowl, which is being held in Montgomery, Alabama, and it's between South Alabama at 6-6 and Western Michigan at 6-6. This is, again, one of those kind of, early matchups to bowl games. We're going to be doing this in order before we get to the playoffs, so we're doing this by date. South Alabama has been pretty interesting this year. Obviously, they're 6-6, but they have had some pretty impressive games. They're a pretty high-powered scoring offense. Western Michigan, I would kind of say, is somewhere in that margin, but a little less impressive. I am going to take South Alabama to win 38-31. I just think that, one, it's home field advantage. They're in Alabama. And two, I'm not moved by Western Michigan overall, unlike South Alabama, who I believe is in a much worse conference. Actually, which conference do you think is worse? I actually don't really know, but I'd probably take South Alabama. Next, we have the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl held in Frisco, Texas, between ranked number 25 and 10-2 Memphis versus 6-6 West Virginia. So the first thing that comes off to your mind is West Virginia is a better conference, and Memphis is in, they're in the AAC. That doesn't really matter to me. Memphis has been one of the most impressive teams, and I thought they could have had a chance to compete for the college football playoffs. Even though they beat Tulane, I was kind of wrong, but that doesn't matter. I believe, despite the fact that West Virginia has played better opponents, I'm going to choose Memphis to win 37-23. Memphis is one of those teams in the lower conferences that you got to keep an eye on for the next few years. They have a really good shot at making the college football playoffs eventually. Next up, we have the Boca Raton Bowl in Boca Raton, Florida, between 8-5 Western Kentucky and 8-4 James Madison. Western Kentucky was in their conference championship, and I'm pretty sure they lost. I think they lost. I had to look back. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they actually lost. Western Kentucky this year is just a part of a much weaker conference, and you can say the same thing about James Madison, but I like the Sun Belt a little bit more than I like CUSA. And competition-wise, James Madison is one of the more premier teams in that conference, so I'm going to lean with them. I'll take James Madison to win 38-34. I like the competition better in the Sun Belt, and I think James Madison handled it pretty well. Next up, we have the Art of Sport LA Bowl, which is going to be in Inglewood, California, where the Rams and the Chargers play, and it's going to be between 6-6 Cal and 10-3 and ranked number 24 UNLV. I would probably look at this matchup as, again, do you take Cal being in the ACC as a reason to choose them over UNLV? But UNLV made it to their conference championship, in which they lost to Boise State, who will be playing in the playoffs this year. So I look at the strength of schedule, I guess, and even though Cal had it technically better and they almost beat Miami, I do not like Cal's team that much. I much rather would pick UNLV to win this one, and I was about to say UNLV more or less has a home field advantage, but it's in California, so I'll take that one back, even though they're kind of equidistance away from Inglewood. I just think that UNLV has actually looked a lot more impressive than people give them credit for, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but I'll only give it to them 23-17. I think it will be a low-scoring, close game, so yeah, UNLV wins slightly. Next up, we have the R plus L Carriers New Orleans Bowl in, of course, New Orleans. And it's going to be between 8-4 Georgia Southern and 9-3 Sam Houston. So Sam Houston's one of those teams that kind of jumped up from the FCS into the FBS Division One program, while Georgia Southern, I'm pretty sure they're kind of in the same boat, but they've been in the Sun Belt for a little bit now. Looking at this competition, it's going to really come down to which do I think is better. Is it the Sun Belt or is it the CUSA? And I already said the Sun Belt. Sam Houston hasn't looked, I mean, they're 9-3, but how impressive is that 9-3 in comparison? And Georgia Southern almost beat Boise State in the beginning of the year. So I'm going to take Georgia Southern to win 34-16. Better competition. They looked more impressive overall, even though their record is less. Next, the Staff DNA Cure Bowl, which is going to be in Orlando, Florida, between 10-3 Ohio and 9-4 Jacksonville State. Now, yeah, it's not 9-3, it's 10-3. But ultimately, this is a very fun matchup because Jacksonville State is one of those impressive on the rise smaller teams, and you don't really think they're going to ever make a college football playoffs, but I think they're going to be very good, especially in CUSA. So they're going to be a contender there for a while, and they just got done winning CUSA. Overall, looking at this matchup, it really just comes down to strength of competition, and in the MAC is slightly better than CUSA. They're like the two worst conferences though in the FBS, so you have to take that into account. I think Ohio's schedule was a little bit tougher. Therefore, I will take Ohio to win this one 31-28. Very close game. I think they're both very impressive. It's going to come down to the wire, but I'll take Ohio overall. Next up, we have the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa, Florida, between 9-4 Tulane and 7-5 Florida. And looking at this matchup, it is again about strength of competition. I know Tulane they were ranked pretty high, and they lost their last two games, one to Memphis and to Army in their conference championship. But Tulane, unfortunately, even though Florida is 7-5, they have been a very battle-tested team, and they have pulled off some very impressive wins this year. I am going to take Florida to win 34-24. Because Florida has better competition, and throughout the year they've played a lot better, so I will take the Gators in this one. And then later that day, we have our first college football playoff matchup. It's going to be held in South Bend, Indiana, between number 10 Indiana, who went 11-1 this year, and number 7 Notre Dame, who also went 11-1. You can easily say these two had very easy schedules, and Notre Dame has a terrible loss. But Indiana also had a very easy schedule, except for Ohio State, in which they got trounced in. So overall, I could make the argument that Notre Dame did better as far as scheduling and how they've won games, but Indiana has been very impressive all year long until as of recently, even though they just got done destroying Purdue before or after the Ohio State game. But it's in South Bend. I know it's not a far drive. It's an in-state matchup. And it comes down to this. Indiana is pass happy. Notre Dame is run happy. So they have their own strengths, but Notre Dame's defense is the reason why I give the Irish the edge in this one, because I do think that Notre Dame has a really good secondary that can handle that kind of offense. I'm going to say, because I don't think Indiana's really good at stopping what Notre Dame has in store, I'm going to take the Irish to win 34-20. It's going to be a little bit more of a romp, and I understand that people are going to say it should be a little bit closer, but until you study Notre Dame's offense, I don't think you're going to get it. I think that Notre Dame is in prime position at this point to make a run, and it really starts with Indiana. And then the next college football playoff game is between number 11 SMU, who lost in the ACC championship game and finished the season off 11-2 and is ranked number 11, versus Penn State, who got done losing in their conference championship against Oregon in the Big Ten, finishing off 11-2, and it's going to be held in Pennsylvania. Overall, this matchup kind of feels lopsided, but it really isn't. SMU can compete, and I'm glad they put SMU over Alabama, and people make the argument, well, Alabama's the better team. I don't doubt that Alabama overall is the better team, but I don't really view it in that way. I understand that's how the playoffs view it, but ultimately, if it came down to me, the way I would view it is the most deserving team, which I believe it's SMU who deserves it more, but that's just me. You can make the argument Alabama's better. I won't argue with you. I just kind of lean towards who has earned it more. And to me, that's SMU. On the other hand, Penn State, I believe Notre Dame should have been higher than Penn State, but I think Notre Dame's better. But Penn State being at number 6 is a good prime spot for them, and it's going to be a really close game. I wouldn't really call it high scoring. It's going to be fair scoring. but I'm going to take Penn State to win 24-21, and in doing so, they would go and play Boise State. I didn't say this prior, Notre Dame would go play Georgia. So Penn State would go play Boise State in their next round. SMU's going to keep it close. They can play like that, but I think Penn State, with the home field advantage, is going to do a lot better and win the game at the end of the day. The next college football matchup is going to be held in Austin, Texas, between number 12 and the ACC champion Clemson Tigers, who are currently at 10-3, versus the Texas Longhorns, who lost the SEC championship game and ended off at the number 5 spot, 11-2. It's two different kinds of tales. I mean, nobody thought Clemson was going to make it in, but then because of Miami choking to Syracuse, Clemson gets the opportunity to beat SMU and make their bid to the college football playoffs. But because they're ranked as the worst of all the conference champions, including against Boise State, ultimately Clemson gets the number 12 seed, and they're going to have to be on the road the entire playoffs. They at no point can be viewed as the home team in any manner. They'll always be viewed as the away team, even when they go to these other bowl games. Clemson has a very tough task ahead of them because Texas's offense, when it gets going, it's hard to stop. And Quinn Ewers is a very, very, very good quarterback. Clemson's defense, I think, is going to be a big factor in this game, but you're talking about the Texas home crowd, which is just straight up terrifying to play at. I remember as a Notre Dame fan playing at Texas, 2015, it sucked. But Texas's crowd, along with the fact that I believe they have a better offense and their defenses are not too far apart, I'm going to give Texas the home field advantage and the fact that they've played tougher opponents. I will go ahead and take the Longhorns to win 37-20. I just think that Clemson, you gave up that big lead to SMU, and people say Texas is far better than SMU. I don't see how you survive this matchup. So good job, Clemson, on sneaking in, but I think it's one and done. And then the last first round college football playoff matchup is going to be in Columbus, Ohio, between number 9 Tennessee, who finished the year off 10-2, versus number 8 Ohio State, who also finished off the year 10-2 in embarrassing fashion. Ohio State is still frustrated with how they lost to Michigan, knowing that they were just one step away from the college football playoffs and potentially the number 1 seed if they could have beaten Oregon. And speaking of which, by the way, if Texas wins, they'll go play Arizona State. Keep forgetting that. This is going to be a really close matchup. Both offenses are extremely potent, and Ohio State needs this game. If Ohio State loses, Ryan Day will probably get fired because you can't lose 4 years to Michigan in a row and then flunk out in the first round against Tennessee. That cannot happen if you want Ryan Day to stay as Ohio State's head coach. And so with that kind of urgency in mind and the fact that Ohio State has an offense that's built for the NFL, I'm going to take the Buckeyes in this matchup to win 35-31. I think that home field advantage, along with the fact that they are more of the bigger threats of the first round teams. But Tennessee, it's a good run, very respectable, but I think it ends in Columbus. Next up, we have the Myrtle Bowl the Myrtle Beach Bowl in Conway, South Carolina, between Coastal Carolina, who is 6-6, and UTSA, so University of Texas San Antonio, at 6-6. Quick note with this matchup, these two teams were commonly trying to fight their way for really good bowl games a couple years ago before the mergers and the new playoff system. These two were pretty competitive and pretty tough in their respective conferences. I mean, Coastal Carolina went undefeated in one of the years? And so when I look at this matchup, I'm like, well, what does these teams look like now? UTSA plays in a far better conference. I think the AAC is better than the Sun Belt. And they did, I guess I'd say, okay. So I'll give them the edge to win 24-19. I think UTSA has just a better offensive dynamic than Coastal Carolina. There's some games where Coastal Carolina just got absolutely blown to smithereens. So I'm not confident in them right now. Give me the Roadrunners. Next up, we have the famous Idaho Potato Bowl in Boise, Idaho, between the 7-5 Northern Illinois and 6-6 Fresno State. So the biggest outlier between these two teams is the fact that NIU beat Notre Dame early on in the year, but then kind of fell apart after that. So at one point they were ranked, and Fresno, I don't believe, was ranked. This matchup, you can easily say that Fresno being in the Mountain West is a lot tougher than I would say Northern Illinois being in the MAC. But I mean, Northern Illinois got that competition, and they're probably going to be ready to play in a game like this. I am going to take Northern Illinois to win 20-13. It's going to be a low-scoring one-score game, but I don't trust Fresno State right now. I'm going to take NIU to win this one, and I'll give them their credit. Taking down Notre Dame, that was impressive. Broke my heart, but it was impressive. Next up, we have the Hawaii Bowl in Honolulu between 6-6 USF and 7-5 San Jose State. This is kind of a little bit of a homer matchup. I mean, I have an awesome stepbrother who went to USF, and so I kind of pay attention to that team a lot. And I mean, one of the biggest outliers is the fact that they went to the ringer with Alabama even into the fourth quarter before Alabama pulled away. To me, that's enough to sway me. I'm going to take USF to win 28-17. They are in a technically better conference, and San Jose State, I mean, some of their losses this year, yikes. But I will take the Bulls in this one. Next up, we have the Game Above Sports Bowl, which can be held in Detroit, between 7-5 Pitt and 7-5 Toledo. Now, at one point, Pitt was on the undefeated run, but after the SMU game, they fell apart. But it's very nice that they get a matchup like Toledo, because even though Toledo's 7-5, they're in the MAC, Pitt is in the ACC. And Pitt had a really strong start to the year. I'm going to take them to win in a blowout, 38-21. I guess a shootout blowout is what you'd call it. But Pitt ultimately has the better team, and they've had the better schedule, and they did a lot better with their schedule, even though both teams finished 7-5. Next up, we have the Rate Bowl in Phoenix, Arizona, between 7-5 Rutgers and 8-4 Kansas State. Now, make your arguments. Rutgers is in a tougher conference. You can say that the Big Ten is better than the Big 12, but Kansas State for a majority of the year was ranked, and they've had some very good matchups. Obviously, I think their best win this year, in my opinion, would be against Colorado, knowing how Colorado turned out afterwards. And Rutgers, I mean, 7-5 in that conference, they didn't look impressive doing it. I am going to take Kansas State to win 30-20. Kansas State is just better, in my opinion. I like their quarterback a lot better and their team a lot better. I'll go with the Wildcats on this one. Next up, we have the 68 Ventures Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, between 7-5 Arkansas State and 7-5 Bowling Green. Now, both are in subpar conferences and subpar play, and they both had impressive games. I mean, Arkansas State, they played pretty impressive against Michigan, but Bowling Green has also played really close to great competition as well. But Bowling Green did it a lot more often. Therefore, for that reason, and again, we're keeping it quick, I'm going to take Bowling Green to win 35-26. I think overall they've had a more impressive schedule, and they've done a little bit better with who they had on their schedule. So I'll go with Bowling Green on this one. Next up, we have the Lockheed Martin Armed Force Bowl, which is going to be in Fort Worth. And it's going to be between 6-6 Oklahoma and currently 8-3 because they haven't played their matchup with Army, Navy. So Navy at one point was ranked, and then Notre Dame destroyed them. Oklahoma, I mean, at the beginning of the year were ranked, but then they just kind of went downhill. But Oklahoma has a late morale boost, absolutely destroying Alabama, and I think it's their matchup that kept Alabama out of the college football playoffs. So Oklahoma is riding high, even though they lost to LSU right afterwards. Oklahoma, to me, is in a very good position. I think they've learned a lot towards the back end of this year, and they'll be better going into next year. I'm going to take them to beat Navy because as great as Navy is, as good as they've been this year, Oklahoma's defense, I think, is going to figure it out pretty early. And after that, does Navy's defense defend well against Oklahoma? I don't believe so. So I'll take the Sooners. 27-24 is still going to be a very close matchup because I do think there are some flaws on Oklahoma's side, but I believe that the Sooners will prevail at the end of the day. Next up, we have the Birmingham Bowl in Birmingham, Alabama, between 7-5 Georgia Tech and 6-6 Vanderbilt, both surprising teams this year. Georgia Tech has the honor of defeating Miami and nearly defeating Georgia. Vanderbilt has the honor of beating Alabama. So these two teams are having very nice seasons despite having very mediocre records and kind of falling apart towards the end of the year, except for Georgia Tech, who just went to the ringer against Georgia. They still lost, but that was a great game. I watched that through. I was rooting for Georgia Tech, didn't get what I wanted. Ultimately, Georgia Tech is this is a really good matchup because I think that both of them have that kind of surprise dog mentality to them. But Georgia Tech, I think, did it a lot more often this year, despite the fact they have that loss to Notre Dame, which was pretty bad, but then they go right afterwards and beat Miami. I'm going to take Georgia Tech to win 38-34. I think that they have it down, and I'm very proud of them this year. Next up, we have the AutoZone Liberty Bowl in Memphis, Tennessee, between the 8-4 Texas Tech Red Raiders and the 6-6 Arkansas Razorbacks. Arkansas had some games this year where I was like, oh wow, they can actually upset some big teams, and they didn't do that. I think Arkansas kind of was a little bit of a letdown. Texas Tech, on the other hand, I mean, whoa, they played really good this year, and they should be feeling really good about themselves going into the future. Again, you can make the argument that Arkansas is in a better conference, but I am going to take Texas Tech's game of play and choose them to win 27-23. I just think that Tech, they figured something out. I mean, they were tough on a lot of opponents this year, so good job, Red Raiders. Next up, we have the DirecTV Holiday Bowl in San Diego, California, between ranked number 21 and 9-3 Syracuse versus 8-4 Washington State. So Syracuse is ranked. I mean, one of their biggest matchups was the last game they played against Miami, in which they won in a shootout against Heisman candidate Cam Ward. And that Miami offense, which is just amazing, but they played great, so you got to give them credit. Washington State's very silent. You don't really hear much about them because they're in the Pac-12, or really the Pac-2. That's going to expand pretty soon, by the way. Washington State, they looked a lot better. Washington State, I believe they did a lot better with, I mean, they didn't play a lot of big opponents, but you got to give them credit. I mean, they looked great. I'm pretty sure they had the win over Washington this year. I'd have to look back and see, but I'm taking the upset. I'm going to go with Washington State. I believe that they're going to win this game 41-35. It's going to be a shootout. Washington State had some games where I watched them. One which was against Texas Tech. They looked amazing. The other against New Mexico, in which they looked awful. But I feel like Syracuse is riding high and is going to come crumbling down to the Cougs. Next up, we have the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl in Las Vegas, Nevada, between 8-4 Texas A&M and 6-6 USC. So USC, you know, they looked good to start the year off and then kind of plummeted. They were pretty average throughout the year. A&M, you know, they started the year off with a loss to Notre Dame, and then they went on a tirade. They looked amazing, had a big win in multiple places. I'm pretty sure one of them was in Tennessee. They looked amazing. And then they just kind of fell apart. South Carolina comes in, Auburn comes in, Texas comes in, and just dismantles them. But I still prefer their team. A&M had a kind of spirit this year that I really, really enjoyed, and I really, really enjoyed watching them overall. I'm going to say they win 17-16 because even though both offenses are pretty good, I feel like this is going to be one of those bowl games that's just low scoring, but very, very locked. I'll take the Aggies on this one. Next up, we have the Wasabi Fenway Bowl in Boston between the 8-4 UConn Huskies and the 6-6 North Carolina Tar Heels. I mean, UConn was the only other independent team besides Notre Dame to have a good season and make a bowl game. How good were they? I don't know. They don't play tougher competition. North Carolina does, and North Carolina, despite the fact that they kind of lost their quarterback and lost a lot of, key pieces, I got to give them credit. North Carolina's had a pretty good season with what they had to deal with, and I'm pretty sure it's them who dealt with. I'm going to have to do a little more research on this, but North Carolina, I think, did a lot better this year than we're going to give them credit for. I think they're going to win 21-15. Just UConn doesn't really play much competition. They had some pretty impressive wins this year, but I'd much rather take the Tar Heels. Next up, we have the Bad Boy Movers Pinstripe Bowl, which would be held in Yankee Stadium between 7-5 Boston College and 6-6 Nebraska. This is more or less like a home game for Boston College because of how close it is. And Nebraska, I mean, I like the quarterback. They had the big win against Colorado early on in the year, and then they failed to kind of push forward, and they almost missed bowl game, but they ended up winning and getting to 6-6. Boston College, on the other hand, they had a promising start to the year against Florida State, and then at one point they were ranked, and then they fell apart against Mizzou, and then from there they just went 7-5 and were kind of there. Boston College has better coaching though, which I will take any day over Nebraska right now. Currently, I'd much take Boston College, so I'm going to take the Golden Eagles to win 28-23. It's kind of unfortunate. I want Nebraska to win, but I think Boston College is a much better team, so I'll take them. Next up, we have the Isleta, New Mexico Bowl in Albuquerque between 10-3 Louisiana Lafayette and 8-4 TCU. Louisiana Lafayette, I mean, congrats to them, obviously, for having a really good year. TCU, I mean, in this new merger, they have been pretty impressive. They've had some pretty good wins this year. This is going to really come down to, again, competition. Again, Big 12 is better than the Sun Belt Conference. So I will take TCU to win this matchup 34-21. And it's kind of funny to think that 2 years ago, they were in the national championship, and now they're just kind of there again. So TCU, congratulations to you. I think you're going to win your bowl game. The Pop-Tart Bowl in Orlando, Florida is between number 18 and 10-3 Iowa State versus number 13 and 10-2 Miami. Miami, I feel like they should have got the benefit of the doubt over Alabama to start off conference championship week, but they didn't. And then, I mean, they weren't going to make it over SMU. I'll give them that. but I have to give them credit for a great year, and Cam Ward was an incredible quarterback this year. He might be the first overall pick, who knows. And then Iowa State, they got to play for a chance to make the playoffs, and at one point they were leading the Big 12 for a while, and then they fell off a little bit. Finished off the year 10-3 in a blowout loss to Arizona State in the Big 12 championship. But unfortunately for them, they're playing probably one of the most potent offenses. And to be fair, Miami has a terrible defense, but it does not matter. Miami's offense is going to cook a lot. I will take Miami in a kind of blowout, 45-24. Really, Cam Ward, he new life, way better in Miami than he was with Washington State. He was good there, but it was way better here in Miami. I will take the Canes in this one. Next up, we have the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl. It's a funny name. In Tucson, Arizona, between the 8-5 Miami, Ohio, and 8-4 Colorado State. When I look at this matchup, I just think about how much competition Colorado State had to play early on and how competitive it was. I think they played better competition. And Colorado State, to me, does feel a little more complete in the sense Miami, Ohio got done getting crushed by Ohio in their conference championship. That's not a good morale boost. I'm going to take Colorado State to win 23-19. It's going to be close, but I'm pretty sure the Rams are going to take this one easy. Next up, we have the Gold Bowling Military Bowl in Annapolis, Maryland, between 7-5 Eastern Carolina and 6-6 North Carolina State. Now, North Carolina State managed to win against North Carolina and make it into bowl game eligibility. And again, they played tougher competition. Eastern Carolina plays in the AAC, and they did pretty impressive this year, but I believe I would much rather in this situation have North Carolina State with how they just came off beating North Carolina. And so I will take them to win 24-14 over Eastern Carolina. It's just better competition, probably a better roster. Now we got a really big bowl game here. The Valero Alamo Bowl in San Antonio, Texas, between ranked number 17 and 10-2 BYU versus ranked number 23 and 9-3 Colorado. What a matchup this is. This could have been the Big 12 matchup had these two teams win out, but they didn't. And because of that, it ultimately just kind of backfired on them. This could have been a much better Big 12 championship. Nothing wrong with Arizona State. I'm happy that they won, but this is going to be great. This is must-see TV. BYU, who I thought for a while would have won the Big 12, versus Colorado, who most popular head coach right now in college football in Deion Sanders, most popular quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, most popular player who's probably going to win a Heisman in Travis Hunter. This is going to be must-watch TV, and this is probably the last statement unless they sit out the bowl games, which teams tend to do that. But hopefully they don't sit out, and Colorado plays at full force versus BYU. And if that's the case, I'm going to take Colorado to win 49-45. I don't want to be one of those people who's like, yeah, but with Colorado, because Colorado does have the pieces to really go into a shootout and win a shootout against a team like BYU. So I'm going to go with the Buffs on this one. Next up, we have the Radiance Technology Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana. I just butchered that. Who cares? Between 10-3 Marshall and ranked number 22, currently 11-1 Army. This is going to be a really, really fun matchup. Army this year has been so dominant, and at one point we could have expected if they could just win out, but then again, they're probably not going to beat Notre Dame. But if they won out, they would have been in the college football playoffs, undoubtedly in my mind. And so both these teams are coming in with very nice schedules. Marshall obviously won their conference championship too, and they're a team I have a lot of respect for. But Army, this is probably the best Army team I've ever seen. And with that said, I'm going to take number 22 Army to win 35-17 over Marshall. I know they still have their matchup with Navy, so that's why they're 11-1 currently. They could have a different record prior to that, but no matter what, I'm taking Army in this one. Next up, we have the TransPerfect Music City Bowl in Nashville, Tennessee, between 8-4 Iowa and ranked number 19, 9-3 Mizzou. Ultimately, Mizzou has stayed up in the rankings for the majority of the year, and they still are a team that is not to be messed with. Iowa, they have looked a lot better this year than in past years, but after losing to Iowa State, they have not been back in the rankings. So ultimately, this feels a little bit easy for me to pick, but there is that time where I'm going to be dumb and I'm going to pick Iowa to win this one as an upset. But note that this is one of those matchups where it doesn't have a lot of information backed up, but Iowa has looked a lot better. And even though Mizzou's most likely going to win this matchup, I'll take Iowa in the upset. So it's kind of like one of those situations where I kind of forgot that I kind of wanted to go for the upset on here. So kind of looking on paper, you would say Missouri. And then I'm like, wait, hold on. I kind of have an upset going on here. I'm going to take Iowa. Next up, we have the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa, Florida, between number 11 and 9-3 Alabama versus 7-5 Michigan. Alabama had the opportunity to make the playoffs, but the committee chose to put them over SMU, and they chose SMU because Alabama had 2 losses this year, which were just terrible, especially a blowout loss to Oklahoma. This is the worst Alabama team I've seen in my life, and note that I started watching college football back in 2009, so I didn't get to witness pre-Nick Saban Alabama. I understand those teams were a lot worse, but for me, this is the worst Alabama team I've ever seen. And as far as Michigan, it's a down year since winning the championship. Last year, you beat Alabama in the playoffs, and then you beat Washington to win the national championship. And then your players go to college football. Jim Harbaugh goes to the NFL. Your other players go to the NFL instead. I said college football. And overall, your team doesn't look great, but you have a great morale boost to win over Ohio State. Therefore, I think there's only one nail in the coffin to really get Alabama to wake up next year, and that's for Alabama to lose this game 26-24. Most likely Alabama's going to win. You never know. I mean, do you consider Michigan better than Oklahoma? Do you consider Michigan better than Vanderbilt? And if you do, these teams can definitely beat Alabama, and I think they have a really good opportunity to do so. There is a big morale boost in Michigan that's not being talked about, and that cannot be understated. I will take Michigan to win, but I think that's also a wake-up call if you're a Crimson Tide. Next up, we have the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas, between 8-4 Louisville and 6-6 Washington. Louisville has kind of held around the rankings. They started falling apart a little bit towards the midway through the season, losing to Notre Dame, then to SMU, but they had a big win over Clemson. And so Louisville has kind of had an up and down year. Obviously, they're better in record than Washington, who transferred over to the Big Ten. And after being in the national championship, you lose your coach, you lose your number 1 overall quarterback, your best wide receiver, and you go 6-6, and you don't look that impressive all year long. And so when I take a look at this matchup, this one's easy. I'm going to take Louisville to win. I have them winning 31-20. This is not the same Washington team we're accustomed to seeing being high up there in the Pac-12. Big Ten, it's a different story. They did not adapt very well. Next up, we have the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida, between number 15 and 9-3 South Carolina versus number 20 and 9-3 Illinois. These two teams are far different. Illinois, I mean, comparatively to Indiana, those were the 2 teams that were shocking in the college football playoff run, but then Illinois just kind of went out and they're sticking in the top 25, but they're playing South Carolina. And South Carolina has one heck of a season. I mean, they've been very shocking this year. I have to go with the Gamecocks to win 29-20. I have to go with the Gamecocks to win 39-20 over Illinois. They've had better competition, and you even have people like Dan Orlovsky. I probably butchered his name. He even suggests that South Carolina should have a legitimate shot beating in the playoffs. He knew it wasn't going to happen, but you could have made the argument. South Carolina wins this one easy. Next up, we have the Kinder's Texas Bowl in Houston between 8-4 Baylor and 8-4 LSU. The gut instinct wants me to choose Baylor because LSU's head coach, Brian Kelly, used to be a former Notre Dame head coach and kind of abandoned us towards the end of the year, and then we had to go with Marcus Freeman. Obviously, he's helped us. I'm not saying he was a terrible head coach. We've got to the playoffs a few times with him. I don't know. It's a little bit of bitter stuff. I think every Notre Dame fan would kind of understand and not understand at the same time. Baylor, on the other hand, interesting season. I'm not impressed, but I do think that it's nice that they were kind of up there in the competition. They just kind of were... They hid behind the Colorados, the BYUs, and they weren't that, they weren't that popular, in my opinion. And then, I mean, LSU, there's a chance they could have made the playoffs, and then you drop a huge one to Alabama. That one sucked. Overall, LSU is the better team, and so I'm going to take them to win 28-24. They had better competition. I think they handled competition a little bit better, but yeah, we're going to go with the Tigers on this one. Now we're at the college football playoff quarterfinals, I guess. And for the VRBO Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona, it's going to be between number 6 Penn State and number 3 Boise State, the winner of all the non-Power 5 teams and the winner of the Mountain West. So many people are saying Boise State has no business hosting a game, and if you want to make that argument, go ahead. But teams always say, oh, you shouldn't have these teams in the college football playoffs. I see it as this. The reason why there was a playoffs in the first place was Boise State was so dominant, and they beat Oklahoma a long time ago in the Fiesta Bowl, and that's what people were talking about. So actually, Boise State's back in the Fiesta Bowl after a few years, and they're very accustomed to being there and winning. Overall, I look at this matchup. Penn State hasn't played much all year long, and even Boise State's only lost this year. I'm telling you, to Oregon, you only lost by 3 points, and they're number one in the nation right now. So I get it. The Mountain West isn't as powerful as these other conferences, but you got to give Boise State credit. And Ashton Jeanty, one of the best running backs I've seen in a long while, since I'd go ahead and say Saquon Barkley. So to me, I'm going to take Boise State to win 31-29. It's going to be a close game. Don't get me wrong. I think Penn State will be very competitive, but people are writing out Boise State as if they're nothing. And I don't agree with that at all. Boise State needs a little more credit. And so I'm glad they're number 3 and that they hosted this game. And I think they're going to make it to the semis. The next college football playoff quarterfinal matchup will be the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Atlanta, Georgia, between number 5 Texas and number 4 Arizona State. Arizona State ended up winning the Big 12. They were projected to be the worst team in the conference this year, and they ended up being the best. Arizona State is very powerful and very dangerous. A lot of people are talking about how dangerous that offense can be, and I agree. I got to see it, and it was pretty harsh what they did to Iowa State, especially in the second half. And that third quarter was unbelievable. But you're facing the former big team that dominated, or at least was one of the more premier teams in the Big 12 prior to coming to the SEC, because Oklahoma technically dominated, which is Texas. And Texas, they did really well, and they had the best ranking of all the SEC teams prior to Georgia beating them. Overall, you got to look at it from this standpoint. It's Texas. And hook 'em horns. Texas is going to win this matchup 28-27. I think they're best fit for this. And Arizona State, this is going to be the toughest team I think Arizona State will play all year long. And it's going to be a very close and fiery matchup, but I will rather take the Longhorns. And they're probably going to have more of a home field advantage because it's in Georgia. And I mean, a lot of the fans get to stay there, I guess. So Texas moves on against Clemson. I believe they'll beat Arizona State as well. The next college football playoff quarterfinals matchup will be the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, between number 8 Ohio State and number 1 Oregon. This is probably going to be one of the most brutal games you'll watch, because these two teams played early off in the year, and had Will Howard gone down a second earlier and they managed to get a timeout in, Ohio State might be the number 1 team. Or it could be Georgia. Who knows what could have happened? But it didn't happen. Oregon ended up winning, and Oregon, they just looked a lot better afterwards. To me, the Ducks have the advantage. I think they have better coaching. Ryan Day's a good head coach, but I like Lennings a lot. I'm going to take Oregon to win 38-34, another shootout, another high 30s kind of game. I think that Oregon overall, and it's going to be more of a home game for Oregon since it's going to be in Pasadena. And so I'm looking at the Ducks situation, and I'm like, this is the scariest team in the playoffs. I know Ohio State got an NFL offense, but Oregon's scary because they can beat you in multiple ways, and so I'll take the Ducks in this matchup. And then lastly of the quarterfinals, we have the All-State Sugar Bowl in New Orleans between number 7 Notre Dame and number 2 Georgia. Now, if I just told you this straight up, I would even say Georgia. That's if I didn't tell you that Carson Beck is out. So to me, without a starting quarterback, Texas blew it. Really, Georgia shouldn't have won that matchup, but they did, and I'll give them credit. Great defensive play, even though that offense was moving up and down for Texas. They just couldn't get anything done. Notre Dame's offense, I do not think is going to struggle as much as some people say they would. And Notre Dame's defense against a backup quarterback, I like the chances I see. I really do, and so do a lot of other people. I'm taking Notre Dame to win this matchup 24-19. Had Carson Beck played, I would easily take Georgia. But since he's most likely going to be out, I'll take Notre Dame in this one. Next up, we have the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, between 9-3 Duke and number 14, 9-3 Ole Miss. Ole Miss was one of those other teams who I thought was going to make the playoffs. At the beginning of the year, they ended up missing it just barely by a hair. Ole Miss's team this year, whoa. I mean, their biggest matchup win was against Georgia in the blowout against the Bulldogs. To me, Ole Miss has a lot of power, and hats off to Duke. At times, I thought Duke should have been ranked this year, but I don't think at all were ever ranked. I'm going to take Ole Miss. This is going to be the toughest team that Duke is going to have to play all year long. And so Ole Miss is going to win 31-19. I think their offense is high-powered. Let's hope some of their players play. Really, I'm kind of looking at this from the perspective that players are not going to sit out, even though I know they're going to sit out. So if players aren't sitting out, this is kind of how I see them with their rosters. Next up, we have the Serve Pro First Responders Bowl in Dallas, Texas, between my alma mater and 6-6 UNT versus 7-5 Texas State. UNT started the year off really hot, and then they just kind of collapsed afterwards. I went to a game this year against Army. They didn't look that great. Texas State, on the other hand, they looked pretty impressive for their conference, but 7-5 as well. Really, UNT's in a better conference, but do I think they're the better team than Texas State? I don't think so. I'm going to take Texas State to win 24-21. It hurts me just a little bit, but overall, I'd much rather have Texas State and kind of where they've played all year long. And UNT's just been on a bad slope. So yeah, I'll take Texas State. I'm just glad UNT made a bowl game. Next up, we have the Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte, North Carolina, between 7-5 Minnesota and 6-6 Virginia Tech. I mean, what? Minnesota's in the better conference. Minnesota had a better record. But it's Virginia Tech, and really, I love to give Virginia Tech the benefit of the doubt in most situations, but they had to win their last game in order to make it into bowl game progression. But I also think they're riding high because of that, and I will take Virginia Tech to win 27-21. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Minnesota has a good team, but it's Virginia Tech. And I know you're like, oh, well, what's Virginia Tech good for? I thought they could have had an opportunity to play in the ACC championship. That's just me. So to me, it's just kind of the expectation I have for them. Next up, we have the Bahamas Bowl in Nassau, Bahama, and it's between 8-4 Buffalo and 8-3 Liberty. And the only reason why Liberty doesn't have 12 games played is because they had one canceled against Appalachian State. Overall, I look at this matchup and I'm just looking at Liberty because we were kind of doing at the beginning of the year projections if this was last year and Liberty would have made the playoffs. I believe Liberty's team is actually really good, and it was doing really, really good until it fell on one of those crazy games to, Kennesaw State. And after that, they tumbled, but it's Liberty. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and win 30-26. And that will be the last bowl game we're talking about. Now we're in the semifinals for the playoffs, and it's the Capital One Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida, between number 7 Notre Dame and number 3 Boise State. What a matchup this is. This is a matchup as a Notre Dame fan I've always wanted to see. And now I'm finally going to hopefully see it if I get my way in these predictions. Boise State, again, they're a team that you don't trifle with around this time of year, but Notre Dame has had one hot stretch since losing to NIU. These are two teams with great running games. I mean, Notre Dame can kill you in the running game, whether it's Riley Leonard or if it's Love or whoever, it doesn't matter. But Boise State got that guy, Ashton Jeanty, who had 29 rushing touchdowns this year and over 2,497 yards. I mean, so I'm sitting there just like, wow, this is going to be a bloodbath. But I then leave it up to the defensive play, and I'd give Notre Dame the edge. And so I'll say Notre Dame wins 36-31. They won't stop Ashton, but overall, Notre Dame, I think defensively will pick up some big plays that will give Notre Dame the edge. And Notre Dame will move on to the national championship. You can call it biasy, but a lot of people, and especially when I was looking at prediction reports, there's a lot of people, especially closer to ESPN, who said Notre Dame would make it. And I believe it because I've seen how Notre Dame's played this year, and it's been really impressive. And then on the flip side, in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic in Arlington, Texas, it's going to be between number 5 Texas and number 1 Oregon. This is where the buck stops with the Longhorns. I know that it's a home game, but it's Oregon. Again, Oregon is tough. Basically, whoever comes out of that one part of the playoff division between Tennessee, Ohio State, and Oregon is most likely going to make the national championship because you can't really see it from the opposite end. I understand Texas is going to try to put up a big fight, but Oregon is going to dismantle them 42-17. I don't see this being a close game. Oregon is that terrifying, and I think that with how much Texas moves up and down but cannot finish, that is a problem because Oregon, they bank on finishing drives. So I will take the Ducks to move on to the national championship. And then we have the college football playoffs national championship game, which will be held at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, between Notre Dame and Oregon. This is a big matchup, and this is one that I dream of seeing because I want Notre Dame to win the national championship so bad in my lifetime. And this would be the best opportunity. I told you early off in the video that there's one team that terrifies me, and it's Oregon. And there's a good reason behind that because no matter how you go toe-to-toe with Oregon, they just keep on coming. They're like the Terminator. They just don't go away. So I want to be biased and say Notre Dame if I really think they have the opportunity. I think they can beat Oregon. But if I'm being smart and not going biased, I am taking Oregon to win 37-34 because Oregon is just so complete. And I saw them winning the Big Ten this year, and more people saw Ohio State winning it. And then Oregon, they took down Ohio State. Just what a year that the Ducks have had because missed out on the playoffs last year. You move to the Big Ten, a tougher conference, and you go undefeated. And now you're number 1. I think Oregon is going to win. I hope if this matchup happens that they don't, and I would love to be wrong here because I would love to see Notre Dame win the national championship. I just think that Oregon's team is very complete, and it's really hard to debate them. Their offense is potent on all angles. In the passing game, it's a tough matchup. I will go with the Ducks to win. And that'll do it for today's episode. Again, NFL stuff is elsewhere, and if you find this video coming out late, just note that this took over an hour to record. So I'm going to try my best to get through it, but yeah, this is kind of where we're dealing with, and I thank you guys for watching, and thank you for 100 subscribers again. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you do, please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe, and go follow me on all my social media, especially Twitter, if you want to see where I stand with the NFL on that stuff. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care. Enjoy bowl game season, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.